Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
Well, it's an election year, and it's crazy season. How do we make it through without going crazy ourselves?
Well, look, since we're talking about the crazy season, anything goes. You want to talk about Russian lasers? You want to talk about Weird Al Yankovic? I mean, what do you want to talk about? Weird Al's got a documentary out that he actually appears in, not as himself, and it's a total mockumentary. Do you know that he made a fake story about his own life and put it out as a movie?
No, but
it's Weird Al.
It's
Weird
Al.
He did a parody on a Weird Al.
He's very consistent. Maybe he can run for office and bring this circus full circle.
Well, this is the crazy season. So what about Russian lasers? You think that thing's real?
Could be. This goes all the way back to John F. Kennedy with the Soviets. The old Cold War warriors from the Soviets to America saw space as just as ground, air, water, sea were battlefields. They saw ultimately space being the controlling one. And so when you think of Vladimir Putin, and this is a guy wanting to put together, I believe, the Russian Empire more than the Soviet Union, though I don't think he liked letting go of the Soviet Union. So I think he's more territorial, but he is old school, and he could be thinking space, and it could be real, or the timing could be really odd, and we could all be being played. You just never, because the definition of today's show, it's crazy season.
It's the crazy season. This conversation brought to you by the crazies. Yeah, and what happens in the political process, now we're into the cycle. And so what I'm beginning to see, and I'll tell you, Michael, I'm seeing it on the right. It's starting to move its way up. There are certain celebrities on the right, in the internet world of the right, in the clickbait world of the right, which is sort of like clickbait websites, and then some people have radio shows, and then they do these big public events.
One's initials is CK. Is that where you're headed?
Yeah. We'll just say there's several of them.
Okay.
There are several of them. Now, I have watched these folks for 44 years, and I watch what their mode of operation is. They go to the establishment Republican money, and they go to a number of conservative billionaires, and they say, "Give us the money, we'll get you the vote." Okay, and so the deals get cut, and there's a large amount of money that gets transferred around. Now, the left is doing the same thing. Soros has got his people out there, and they're plotting their strategies with their clickbait websites and their fake news stories and their special events and their campus visits and their concerts. All of this is starting to move now. And the way that it starts is with consultants sitting in rooms creating a universe of voters that they believe the right magical combination will net result in a win at the top of the ticket and then have down ticket power. And they chart and they map these things out. Then it's like a board game. Well, it's on a board, right? It's usually, at least it was on whiteboards. I don't know if they do it on iPads now. Then what you do is you figure out which issues can be used as wedge issues to leverage those key points of the universe to produce the sort of voter turnout that you want. Then from there, you determine which form of media will basically be best designed to move those people in the places that you want them.
So we saw abortion being a big one for the left. We saw
Huge.
Israel being a big problem for the left. But we did a story this morning that I sent you on the president backing off of regulations involving electric vehicles because it has failed.
Excuse me while I go nuts. Crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. But deep buried in that story, and we discussed it on your morning show.
Your morning show.
Your meaning the listeners, not me.
No, your morning show.
Right. No, not mine.
No, you're right. No, your morning show. But
it's your morning show with Michael DelGiorno, and then David comes and visits a lot.
It's our morning.
But it belongs to the listeners, so yours, them, not us. Anyway, there's our little crazy season episode. But buried in that story was how he was really cutting a deal for the auto union workers prior to the election. In fact, it's not even a punt like, oh, we got caught. This is our Cylindra. No, it's a temporary punt till after the election. So just to show you, it's everything just one layer under. Oh, let's narrow that, or let's increase that gender gap. Oh, let's get these union workers. Oh, let's get these federal employees charged up. Oh, let's get everybody scared against abortion. we're all like, we did that Washington Post article on your morning show, and we talked about, well, the title I loved, why does every debate go to the extremes?
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, where he went with it was extreme.
Yeah, instantly.
Instantly.
Yeah, that was Hogan of Maryland. Yeah,
but isn't that the game they're playing, though? I mean, like, if they get their money and give it to the evangelicals, and evangelicals go do something extreme, and the left does something with their money and go do something extreme. Every argument has to be about the extreme things, not the common ground.
That's precisely where we are. And let's take another place, like crazy promises that can't possibly be done. There's all this railing against the administrative state. Okay, you and I are down for that argument because it is crazy. We talk about the fact that you've got about 3 million federal employees. 3 million federal employees, but total you've got about 23 million government workers in the United States. Not saying that if you have a government job, there's anything wrong with the job or anything wrong with you. No, we need people to do good jobs of public service, and that's all fine, and we pay for it. But think about this, 23 million people in the workforce that are being carried by state and federal budgets, which are basically paid for by taxpayers. So you think about this, you're paying your home mortgage, this is where government gets very real. Right? You're paying your home mortgage, you're paying your taxes, you're paying all the stuff you got to do to survive. You got your insurance, you got food and inflation and energy costs and taking care of relatives and healthcare and the budget. But on top of that, there's no line in your budget that says, oh, and by the way, I've got to help support 23 million people who work for the government. Now, of course, they're not all in your state, but you've got to support 3 million federal and then all the state ones that are in your state. My goodness, we don't think about that. We say, well, sure, that line's in my budget. It's in my taxes. No, it's actually in the taxes that they take out before you ever see it. That's how crazy it is. So when any candidate comes forth and tells us, I am going to shrink the size of government, you're probably not. And I guarantee you, you're not going to do it by yourself. You know why? Because of those federal government employees, they're all protected by either civil service or unions.
At best, Donald Trump could only be a bully pulpit for that. The only thing he really had the power to do was lead the tax cuts.
I mean, you can take out some people at the top.
Into COVID, and it just led to $5 more trillion in debt. Can I give a nomination for one of those crazies?
Sure.
How about in California where they're just leaking at the legislative level, at the state level, $50 minimum wage? That's for voter turnout. So that it can spread on the street that, they're going to raise their minimum. And of course, and I laughed. I said, well, why not just say 100? 200. Let's just, let doctors get $12 an hour. Who's going to sit and make $50 an hour at McDonald's? But they like that just to we joke about it on the air, which gives it oxygen. Then it starts spreading on the street. And I bet you they get some voter turnout over it.
Same game with college loans.
Oh, that never came.
No, we've watched this over and over and over again. And both sides do it. So we are entering the crazy season. Now, I'd like to believe that all the folks that listen to your morning show, which is actually their morning show.
Oh, let's not even do that anymore. Let's rename it.
And no, we can't. We can't. It's the magic.
Good morning and welcome to their morning show. See, now it doesn't work.
Now you're in a pronoun game, and that's crazy too. So, okay. So when we're talking to people that are paying attention, whether it's the public square, whether it's 1850, whether it's your morning show, whether it's Kids on the Square, whatever the programs are that they're listening to, I know from experience, these are really good people who aren't easily fooled. The problem is all of us have to deal with folks that are getting just that little bit of layer. If you look at the amount of people who pay attention in what's going on in America, 50% of Americans who are eligible to vote will not vote this year because they're not even registered, and they may never be registered in their lifetime. So let's take that. 50% of the adult population, about 280 million adult population, about 140 million of them, bye-bye, not even in the game. About 140 million Americans are in the game. They're registered to vote, and they will come out. Now, of how many of those will vote? In a really big presidential election year like we've had in the last couple of years, you might get, of the 140 million, you might get 120, 130 million, maybe even 140 million. I mean, you won't have 100% voter turnout, but we were up over 75, 80% in some places in these last elections. We've had big turnout, but remember, that's only of the half. Okay? So you're going to have a lot of people vote.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will vote. But here's the point. People, as far as the people who are paying attention, nowhere near that much.
Right.
I mean, of the half of the people who care, 75 to 80% of them will vote. Only 25% will be paying attention.
I remember sophomore year of high school. Give you an example. Now we'll go to 1980. And I really, civics, psychology,
sitcom music,
sociology. Don't listen to him, Jonah. Don't take any egging on from him. No, those were my favorite classes. All right. So I was kind of not your average sophomore, junior. I was interested in this stuff, but I remember my mom had a friend named Sonia, and she talked kind of like a computer. And she was always talking about Congressman Tozan and writing Congressman Tozan. And I was just like, who even knows who their congressman is? I mean, like, nobody knew. Nobody paid attention. I mean, Sonia was like a drop in an ocean that really cared, really studied issues, really communicated as a constituent. And I remember thinking, what an odd animal that was. Well, then you get post-Ronald Reagan, never mind that, post-9/11, and with it, the birth of talk radio, the birth of 24-hour cable television, the birth of social media. You know everything I'm laying out. Now I think people do pay attention year-round, not in season and out of season, but a lot of people pay attention throughout.
A percentage.
We used to see a very small percentage that paid any attention until 4 or 5 weeks out. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think we have 2-year presidential cycles, and they're too long, and no one ever governs. And then once they're elected, they're already not governing; they're just campaigning for their reelection.
Yeah.
But do you think this is all that blah, 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 to ask this question? When I first met you, we talked about that 80-20, and it was maybe even a little less than 20, that are really engaged, and when the rest pay attention for a little period of time. Do you agree it's grown?
No.
Still not grown.
Nope.
That we're blinded by the information universe that we communicate every day, and it feels bigger.
And here's how you if you track the amount of people who watch nightly news, whether it's network or cable or nightly news shows, and you look at that, Fox News' best night's 3 million. I mean, a wildly insane night is 4 million. That's 1% of the population.
Yeah,
that's about roughly a little bit more than 1.5% of the adult population, and they're the biggest cable network. That's day in, day out.
Let me challenge you. Let me challenge you and ask you. When I was growing up, we only had 3 channels. You had
a lot more people per capita watching the news.
Right. So
everybody watched the evening news.
Were you a Frank Reynolds, who I was a huge fan of? I could go later in life, and then we could do Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw. But back then, Peter Jennings and Walter Cronkite, I mean, these guys were great.
Big deal.
But we were all funneled not just to 3 stations, but to a specific time at 6 and for local at 10. And I think that's why it seemed more, where now it's spread out throughout the day, on demand, and to specific shows. So I think it's a little unfair to act like, well, now nobody, I think they've lost a lot of trust. I mean, it used to be in those days, if they said it, it was real, and it usually was.
I don't think it's anymore. I think it's about the same.
It's just spread out.
Yeah, the statistics that we try to track as close as we can is about 24% of the population that votes, so it's 25% of the half, pays attention pretty regularly. And you can do that by looking at website visits, newspapers, which are almost non-existent, but there's still some there, and subscriptions, which are still there, but they pay attention. And about 1% of the country leads. 1% of the country leads. Now, they've got to go out and get everybody else to vote for them. And this is now when the crazy season begins.
Let me ask you on crazy season, because there's a vulnerability. There's so much crazy that when you see someone acting or speaking sane, there's a temptation to make them a hero or inflate them beyond normal. And you can get duped by...
it's not Clown Town, yeah.
Well, yeah, but there might be 2 layers under, some crazy there, too. That's a vulnerability. Or I think of the capacity issues that we've talked about. You know as well as I do, what we do for a living will burn you out fast. And that's why we've made a pledge not to do anything alone, because we just think there's something about 2 together, and then how we rest and how we recover. Do people get burnt out, too? I mean, should we here's the better analogy.
Yeah,
an accountant during accounting season. Everybody knows, if you've ever had a close friend that's an accountant, you just stay away for 3 months because they're in crazy season.
Yep.
Should people start giving themselves some breaks from some things?
I did one of the first talks I ever did when I began to serve at the American Policy Roundtable, which is 40 years ago now. I included a story about crispy critters. Now, you probably don't remember Crispy Critters, but that was a breakfast cereal.
No.
And it was pretty popular breakfast cereal. And I said, what happens to most people when they get involved with all the new enthusiasm of let's go ahead and make something happen, and they find a candidate they're excited about, or it's a presidential election, or it's somebody that's running for Congress, it doesn't take them very long to go from enthusiasm to complete burnouts. I mean, they fundamentally turn themselves into Crispy Critters. They are burned at the edges, especially if their entrance in is on social issues, because everything is a ping pong match on the extremes.
Right.
And in crazy season, that's all you get. And this is being driven by consultants behind the scenes to drive you into a fever pitch.
They're wagging the dog.
Yeah, and you can end up being completely burned out. And it's not healthy.
It's halftime here at 1850 Main Street. Time to freshen up that cup of coffee. You can start every morning off right by listening to Your Morning Show with Michael DelGiorno. Tune in to stations across America and online at the free iHeart mobile app. Get a head start on the big stories of the day every day with Your Morning Show on the iHeart Network.
Well, one of the things that's been a great antidote for me on this over the years, because we've been as an organization, we've been in some pretty pitched battles, and I'm some pretty and outgunned and outmatched 10-1, 50-1, 100-1 in regards to revenue and media, and some big campaigns or big statewide ballot issues. I have taken such great solace in Psalm 37, in the 12th verse, where it says that God laughs at the wicked, for he knows their day is coming. I got to remember that in the midst of this mano a mano, consultant versus consultant, megatonnage media, blasting, screaming, yelling, shouting, promising, lying, whatever else it takes, God knows that these people aren't going to get away with anything. And it's funny because it comes out in the wash, so to speak, a lot sooner than you think. Like, let's go back to what you talked about with electric vehicles. That has been a crock from the start. We know it's junk science. We know it's bad politics. We know it's bad business. Everything about the electric vehicle scam has been a scam.
I could reel off a few right now, but you'll accuse me of being Sean Hannity, so I'm not taking that bait. But from its carbon footprint to its cost to how long we own cars
to poor,
versus the
poor
expensive
people mining with their bare hands in third world countries, yeah.
to how far it can go,
Yeah.
to how quick it can charge, to everything you got to do to your garage, to your lifestyle, all for what?
All for what? All based on a false promise to move the environmental agenda. And what is the basic drive of the environmental agenda? It's to convince people that the world is coming to an end if you don't change your way and surrender your decision-making power to people who are smarter than you. You've got an article, and you sent it to me, and about a couple that made
I want to apologize before you even bring it up, whatever it was, because I think I added to your crazy season.
no, about the young couple that was explaining why they can't have children.
Oh my gosh. Well, only because I wanted you to see this is the face of the I don't know what, the duped, the ignorant, they are so convinced that the world is coming to an end, and they have been so drained of hope. They make $200,000 a year, and they're telling you they can't have kids because they simply can't afford it. And why bring all the classic,
Yeah.
But they were so proud of themselves in their proclamation. I thought, well, now here's two faces you can put to that indoctrinated.
I told you watch the movie Idiocracy, because that's
Which I still haven't.
That's
I gotta
the
write that
premise
down.
of the movie, is that people who suddenly decide that it's impossible to have children because the circumstances will never be perfect, and so they stop having children. Now the movie goes completely off the rails, and I don't recommend anyone watch it publicly.
I just can't believe he thought of it before Mel Brooks. Yes, Idiocracy at the center is everybody who's quote unquote smart stops having kids, so only the idiots are reproducing.
And so what
therefore,
you
end up with Idiocracy.
Now, it's an interesting, it's a bad movie to watch. I don't recommend anybody watch it. I'm just telling you what the story is. But ironically, the people who've told me the most around the country to watch this movie are school teachers, because they say that that's what they see in their classroom every day. And I didn't say that. They said that. People get mad at me about it, but I'm just telling you, there's a sense that the answer to all of this is to simply go hide in a cave, don't have children, don't live. It's crazy. That's crazy talk.
Here is my opportunity to make David feel older. So you were, I was at the tail end of the Jesus movement and found at 13 years old. You lived it. How different subliminally, this is more subliminal, than the hippie era of checking out and, you know.
Great question.
Yeah, because
question.
I tend to see things happening in 50-year cycles constantly.
Sure, it does.
It was 40 with Moses, but I think this one will be 50. I'm not so certain that we're not in like the same thing. It manifested with hippies then. Now maybe it's not goth. What's a hipster or whatever. Maybe the things have changed, but there's this mentality of checking out. That's why we're so fascinated with leaving reality and living on the internet, or living a fake reality, or why we're checked out from hope and checked out from purpose and checked out, from drive and success. It seems like it's the same thing with a different name.
Well, it's an interesting proposition because what Francis Schaeffer talked about, the whole anti-war movement, the whole hippie movement, and he spoke about it endearingly because he admired the fact that all over the Western world, across Europe where he was serving in Switzerland, as well as in the United States where he was having a significant impact, you had young people checking out on the rabid materialism of the culture that came back from World War II and decided that because of all that they had seen and all that they had lost, they wanted to rebuild a society bigger, better, stronger, faster, and give their kids everything that they either didn't have or dreamed about while they were in a foxhole somewhere. And what ended up happening was we were so into the material side of the process that kids didn't find any substantive meaning. There was no spiritual side. And that's what was the driving force of the whole hippie movement, the whole anti-war movement, which then turned into a quest for meaning, which then exploded into
was
the
a
Jesus
cultural
movement.
awakening and a spiritual revival, which could give people hope. That may be on the other end of this. You did something fascinating at Christmas when you looked at a year, and really the lesson of Christmas in America was not just finding the manger in the middle of the Depression and after the Depression, but when we just came face to face with what the Depression produced. Yeah. It took the Depression to raise the children that would liberate the world. And then the 50s produced the rejection of morality, traditionalism, and checkout. And I'm not so certain that's not where we're at. But what that has to do with crazy season, well, that's just kind of like when I was watching that Muhammad Ali documentary, there's America in the background. I guess that's kind of in the background of crazy season.
We're going to get out of the crazy season. There is an end to this tunnel. And the amazing thing is that the end of the tunnel will produce the same responsibilities and the same necessities, no matter who wins the election. So I'm not suggesting for a second that anyone would say, don't be involved. What I'm saying is don't drink the Kool-Aid. Don't let them do that to you. Don't become a crispy critter. Because yes, every election is the most important election because it's the one that's in front of us.
Has any crazy worked itself? I think Fani Willis and Nathan Wade, that's crazy season stuff. What's happening to Trump in court?
That's crazy stuff.
We talked about this on your morning show. Look, you may ban him from doing business for 3 years, but I don't know how much capital you just ran out of your state because nobody's going to want to invest and do business in New York. You may have shot yourself, not in the foot, right in the heart, and you're already in a mass exodus. So that's crazy. That's definitely crazy time. Trump getting harassed in court, the gall of Nikki Haley that continues, Joe and the sands in the hourglass of his memory that is fading, RFK and how wide and how long is that road?
Well, how about her report on Biden? He's too old. He's too old to stand trial. But he's guilty as all get out. But
Russian lasers, that's in there.
Russian lasers.
We're back. I mean, the debt ceiling is a crisis now. It literally happens inside once a month. So that's not a crisis. That's normal. Bills are due.
Check your T-shirts at the door.
Maybe Manchin. The whole Manchin quickly.
How nuts
and then
is
looking
that?
around and then, no, I'm not going to run. That's probably the only thing that was uncrazy season. Like,
well, I don't know. To me, that was just as crazy as anything else because all this time it was all leaning in that direction. He decides he's not going to run. What the heck was that all about? Okay.
Well, when you get down to Mitt Romney as your running mate, it's time to think about retirement. That's too many white T-shirts.
Stick with 1850. We'll try to get through the crazy stuff together.
Yeah. And if you find somebody you can trust, stick with it.
Did you know that you can hear Michael and David every day on Your Morning Show on the iHeartRadio network? You can tune in daily or log on live to the free iHeart mobile app. Get a head start on the big stories of the day every day on Your Morning Show. Then join us here where the conversation continues. Subscribe today so you don't miss a minute and visit 1850mainstreet.com to find out more. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.